Welcome to State of Tech. My name's Jared. It is the beginning of 2017 and all of the phones are coming out, which means I have lots of devices to play with and talk about, which is fun. It's fun, but it's also stressful because, you can't carry a ton of devices on you. You have to choose between one or maybe two devices if you even have a reason to have two different phones, and which one's the best. So, there's a couple of phones that I'm not really going to talk about in this video. What we're going to be talking about is the iPhone 7, which isn't necessarily a new phone. This is the 7 Plus, the red edition. So I guess you could say it's a new 2017 phone, although the internals are still the same. We have the S8 Plus here, the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus, and the LG G6. Now, the LG G6, of course, is a bit smaller. It looks even smaller than the rest of the phones because the other two have cases on them. The LG, you don't even really need a case because it has a self-healing back on it. But nonetheless, let's talk about some of the features of each of these devices. So start with the iPhone 7. Most of you are probably familiar with all the specs because the phone's been out for a while. I wanted to talk about some of the benefits of each of these devices. Some of them are going to be specs just to kind of be a comparison. But really, I wanted to talk about what shines with each of these devices in those specs. And then we'll come back and we'll do some top 5 reasons videos that kind of help you better decide because I think each phone you can talk about at length, and so each phone probably deserves its own video. So obviously with the iPhone you have Apple Pay. The other devices, no other device has Apple Pay except Apple devices. Apple Pay, say what you want to say about it. It works pretty well. Some places only accept Apple Pay. They don't have Android. So depending on the devices that they're using, the cash registers, the POS systems, Apple Pay is more well known than the other ones. If you say Android Pay, people are like, a lot of people don't know what that means unless they have a newer Android device. Even Samsung Pay, I would say there's even lots of people with Samsung Pay enabled Samsung devices that don't even know what Samsung Pay is. However, I really like Samsung Pay. We'll talk more about that. The iPhone also has the dual cameras. They aren't the first ones to do the dual camera. I guess maybe you could say that they were the first ones to popularize the dual camera. The dual cameras are decent in the iPhone 7. I would say that the wider angle camera is better on the iPhone 7 Plus than the more telephoto or whatever you want to call it, secondary camera. Whenever I switch from one camera to the other, I feel like the quality of the image does decrease just a little bit, but it does have dual cameras, and that is a pro more than it is a con. Obviously, the iPhone has iOS, which continues to get better. Sure, it's not making any leaps and bounds as far as huge changes like you see when in some of these other devices, they get big UI changes. But the one thing that you can always count on with an iPhone is that the user experience is going to be consistent and that there aren't going to be any huge curveballs thrown at you. So if you're the kind of person that likes your devices to remain kind of similar from year to year, you get new features, but it isn't it's not like you're learning a whole new phone. Definitely a pro for the iPhone. The iPhone 7 Plus are IP67 certified. It's not as good as IP68, which both of these devices are, but it still can withstand, being in some water or some of the elements. It's sealed enough to be protected to an extent. HD display, 401 ppi. It is one of the only phones that has came out that is considered a flagship phone that still has an HD display. Whether you need more than an HD display can be argued depending on what you're trying to do. But an HD display is one of the reasons why the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus have amazing battery life. They're not squeezing in more pixels than are needed. They're also not squeezing in more resolution than is really needed in today's day and age. Has a 2900 milliamp battery, which is significantly smaller than a lot of the other phones, considering its size, but it also outperforms in battery life a lot of times over the other phones. And it's because of those things like the chip that they've created, the HD display, stuff like that. So iPhone 7, there are other specs about it that you can talk about, but those are the ones that stick out to me, that make sense to me. Let's move on to the S8. So as we mentioned at the beginning about Samsung Pay, I really think that if you were to stack up all of the different mobile wallets, I guess you could say, Samsung Pay is probably one of the most feature-packed ones. I mean, with Samsung Pay, you can pay at a terminal that doesn't even support tap to pay, because it has technology in the phone that allows you to use your phone in that way, and it uses the magnetic force or field or whatever you want to call it to send that data through to the terminal reader, which is pretty cool. But a lot of readers, a lot of POS systems, all of that stuff these days, a lot of them are getting tap to pay. They're upgrading their systems. And so Apple Pay and Android Pay and using Samsung Pay and that tap to pay instance are working on a majority of them. So that's definitely, advancing. Samsung Pay, though, still pretty cool. I really like the fact that you can use that on a traditional or old style terminal and have it work. This has a wide usable display. I mean, if you look at the bezels and everything on the iPhone, you've got a phone that is not really any bigger here in the Samsung with the iPhone, yet you have a ton more screen real estate on the Samsung than you do on the iPhone. And to me, that is pretty huge. That's a big deal. A lot more screen for the same size phone. So the 6.2-inch screen with the 529 ppi, that is huge. That is over 100 more pixels per inch on this device than it is on this device. And to say whether you need those or not is really subjective. I mean, the display looks great on the iPhone. The display looks great. I would say a little better on the S8 Plus here. The S8 Plus just does have a great display. And I was having a conversation about this earlier. All the flagship phones these days have fantastic displays. Whether it's these three, whether you've got the Google Pixel or the HTC U Ultra, they're all fantastic displays. It really just comes down to little nitpicking things that you can say one is better than the other. So the S8 has a fantastic display with way more pixels. So if you are into those pixels and that's one of your main drivers, maybe the S8 is your option. The camera here, it has a 12 megapixel camera, a single shooter. So this has a 1.7, which is a little bit wider of an aperture than the iPhone 7. So what that means is it's going to let a little bit more light in. It also has a bigger sensor. So that's good. What it doesn't have, though, is that ability to punch in and get a little bit closer to the action without losing resolution. They have added a software option in here that allows you to punch in a little bit closer, but it is digital zoom and it does degrade. Anything that happens digitally as far as pulling in closer, zooming in, you're going to degrade the quality of your image because it is software, not optical. So decent camera, though. It's, from what I understand, no camera upgrade over the S7. However, it's still a fantastic camera. There have been software advances, and it does do a great job with that. And I'll talk more about that in another video. The S-Voice I've never really been a huge fan of S-Voice. We have Siri here, we have S-Voice here. The LG uses Google, the Google system for speech, voice to text and whatnot. So when I'm narrating a text message in or narrating text into an email or something, one of the things that's always been super annoying is that when you're narrating, it takes over the entire keyboard. You don't get any of your keys. So when you want to delete a word or when you want to hit return to go down to a new line or something like that, you don't have any of that. On the S8, they have actually included a small set of keys down below so that you can do those without having to jump out between the keyboards or jump out of voice and back into the keyboard. It's a huge time saver, and I think it was a great addition. Also, headphone jack on the bottom of the device here. They managed to get a headphone jack into this phone, as well as all the other features that this phone has that are omitted on some of the other phones. So the headphone jack is great. Wireless charging, it has it. Other phones do not. Not many phones these days seem to have wireless charging, and they say it's so they can fit a larger battery in there. But Samsung still has managed to fit a 3,500 milliamp battery into this phone while still giving it wireless charging and fast charging, by the way. So lots of features and stuff packed into this phone. And it's IP68 certified, which means go ahead and throw it in your swimming pool. It's not going to hurt it one bit. Fantastic phone. The LG G6. Are these phones better than the LG G6? Well, let's talk about a few of the features here. The LG G6 has this new 1x2 display, which is, and 1x2 is basically means that the screen is twice as high as it is wide. It's one of the first times that we've seen a phone like that, or pretty much any screen like that. And they've really ran with it with that whole 1x2 kind of display. Now, I really like it. I like having a longer display because it gives me more information. It's one of the reasons I like higher resolution displays on my computers, because if I'm looking at a website, I can see a lot more of the website because it's a taller display. It's fantastic. I like that about this phone because it's narrow and wide. Even on the S8 is wider. It's not 2x1, so you're technically not getting as much length on the screen as you are on the LG, even though the LG is a smaller phone. So you're getting that 5.7-inch display with 564 ppi on this one. So they went even further than Samsung has gone with that S8, which is an amazing amount of pixels packed into a small device. So do you need all those pixels? Like I said, it's really hard to say. 5.7-inch display makes it smaller than the S8, makes it equivalent to the size of the iPhone 7 Plus. This phone has a 13 megapixel rear shooter in it with a 1.8 aperture, and then also a 13 megapixel with a 2.4. So the 1.8 is the same as the iPhone as far as the aperture goes, but the secondary, more telephoto or punched-in shooter is 2.4, which is a bit wider than the iPhone. I really like the cameras on here. I like the way that LG has put their cameras together. The way that they interact and work inside of the camera app is probably my favorite so far as dual camera phones go. Or dual back shooter, dual lens cameras. 3,300 milliamp battery in this phone. I have easily been able to get full day life out of it. I think that they did a really good job of optimizing this device. Sure, it has a huge pixel count, but it is a smaller display, so it's not as battery hungry or as some of the others. It's IP68 certified, just like the others, but they also went and added shock testing to it as well. So it's certified with some certification that I was unaware of existed for shock. A lot of them, they will do drop tests. They will build them to a certain extent, but they'll just certify them with IP67, IP68. This one also, the LG G6 has gone above and beyond that. The other thing I like about it, relatively stock Android. They have not gone too crazy with skinning and reimagining what Android should be, like the S8 is. The S8 is they've gone kind of swung the pendulum back the other direction and have added a lot of Samsung to Android. They took it away for a little while. Now it's back. A lot more over the top of Android than there was in the last version of the S series Galaxy phones. Now, narrow design of this phone. I mean, obviously it is a smaller phone. It's significantly smaller than both of these other phones. It's easier to hold, and you still get a lot of data or display on the screen. So because it's a narrow phone that's still tall, you're getting a lot of information. You're not losing out on anything, but you're getting a phone that's easier to hold in the hand, which I really like. And lastly, it has a self-healing back, which some people have gone and done, knife tests and stuff on the back. I'm not going to do that because I'm not crazy. And I bought these phones with my own money. But the self-healing back means that maybe you just don't need a case for this phone because you set it down on the table, it lands on some little debris that's on your table, and it's not going to scratch up the back of the devices like it would with these other phones. All the phones have had that problem What I really liked about the LG G4, it had kind of that leathery feeling back. I didn't need a case on it. I could set it down. I wasn't worried about it. Plus, I could pop the back off and replace it with another one. You can't do that on this phone. But the self-healing back means maybe you don't necessarily need a case. If you're like me, you really only use a case just to protect the back of your phone. That's maybe you don't need one with the LG G6. So that's going to do it with this kind of comparison talk between these devices. Obviously, there are other specs and information that may factor in as an important thing to you. What I wanted to talk about is some of the more important things to me, which are camera, battery life, display, and then just some of the other little features that I find are becoming more important to me these days. Which phone do I think is the one that I would end up keeping? It's really hard to say. I mean, the iPhone I will end up keeping because the iPhone's an iPhone and there aren't like 12 different iPhones that you can choose from. As far as Android goes, I try to limit myself only to having one daily use Android phone. However, during this time of the year when everybody's dropping their new phones, I end up with multiple phones. So make sure to subscribe to our channel here on State of Tech because I'll have some more in-depth informational and opinionated videos about these different devices to help you make a decision on whether you should purchase one or not. So make sure to subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you like this video. Till next time, we'll see you. Thanks for checking out State of Tech.